Okay, welcome everybody to today's program. My name is John Haber. I'm the Field Services Director for the California Preservation Foundation. Today's part is the third part in a three-part series entitled Eat, Drink, and Be Merry. This is the Be Merry part. We are looking today at miniatures in architecture and design. We have Amy McKune who will be joining us momentarily to present from the museum, and I'll introduce her in a moment. But I just also wanted to introduce my colleague Lisa Versace, who's also going to be helping me moderate today's program. As you may know, this is the third part of a three-part series, and we cap it off with an auction. And we want to encourage everybody to visit our auction page at californiapreservation.org/bid. That's where you'll find over 24 items, and many of them still have low starting bids. So we encourage you to bid on the auction items by visiting californiapreservation.org/bid. I also wanted to acknowledge the series sponsor. This program is sponsored in part by Napa County Landmarks, and I wanted to thank Napa County Landmarks for their support for this series. And finally, also to encourage you to donate to the California Preservation Foundation by visiting californiapreservation.org/donate, or join as a member by visiting californiapreservation.org/join. With that, I wanted to introduce today's presenter, Amy McKune. She's with the National Museum of Toys and Miniatures, and she'll give us a broad overview of architectural miniatures, and we're really looking forward to her presentation today. Thank you, Amy, for your time.
Well, thank you for inviting me. I'm going to share my screen. Okay, can you see that?
Yes, looks great.
Great. Okay. Well, today I'm going to talk about the miniatures in the National Museum of Toys and Miniatures, which is in Kansas City, Missouri. I am the curator of collections at the museum and have been here for about 6 years. So before I delve into a sampling of some of our architectural fine-scale miniatures, I'd like to take just a minute to tell you about the National Museum of Toys and Miniatures. The museum opened to the public on the south end of the University of Missouri Kansas City campus in 1982. Museum co-founders Barbara Marshall and Mary Harris Francis had spent several years forming their personal collections of miniatures and toys. The family story is that they had returned from a trip where they had been buying toys and miniatures and were showing Mary Harris's mother what they had purchased. And she said, if you girls buy one more thing, you're going to have to open a museum. And they thought, oh, well, maybe we will. So they started searching for a location. The original location was a 1911 home that had been bequeathed to the University of Missouri, Kansas City. It was 7,500 square feet. They opened that in that building in 1982, but really by the time they opened, they had already outgrown the space. So they did expansions in 1989 and 2004, and now we're a total of 33,000 square feet. In 2014, the museum closed for 19 months to do a renovation. The toy galleries were completely renovated. The miniature galleries were not changed as dramatically, but had some video and interactive elements added, as well as a new gallery in the artist studio where we talk about how miniatures are made, because we find that that's one of the things that our visitors are most curious about. Today, we own over 95,000 objects, about 22,000 of which are fine-scale miniatures. So there's no better way to start than to describe the characteristics of fine-scale miniatures. This scale display at the entrance of the museum's miniature galleries shows a full-size setting with its fine-scale miniature counterparts on the right. The sampler is based on one in the collection of Colonial Williamsburg entitled The Chase. The miniature was done by Esther Robertson. The chair was made in 1973 by a legend in the fine-scale miniature movement, Paul A. Runyon. All fine-scale miniatures are handmade to scale. The most common scale in our collection and in this genre is 1/12, meaning 1 inch equals a foot. That specific scale, though, is not required. We own works that range from 1/6 to 1/144. Fine-scale miniatures have an inspiration work, a full-size work of art that the artist has decided to create in miniature. They're not always exact replicas, but when they deviate, the artist has specific reasons for doing so. Fine-scale miniatures are built of similar materials using similar techniques and often function like their full-scale counterparts. An example I always like to give is that if you have a bureau with dovetailed drawers, the miniature will have dovetailed drawers, partially because that builds the strength of the miniature, but also that it is a replica of the full-size product inspiration piece. Clocks can work, musical instruments can play. A great example is this harpsichord, one of two made by Johannes Landmann in 2004. It would make a sound if played, but you can't miniaturize sound, so it wouldn't sound quite like you would expect. Regardless, Landmann included a tuning instrument with the harpsichord. The artist used Castello boxwood, European boxwood, cherry, and Africa and Buyua to carve the work. The mermaid between the posts is carved of a single piece of wood. Landmann is primarily a miniature painting, but this piece demonstrates that his skills extend beyond painting. What I find really interesting is that the painting under the lid depicts a musical contest between Apollo and Marsyas, judged by King Midas. So he was kind of taking on a different format of work, but also showing that he could do this painting. Most of the miniatures that I'm going to show you today are part of a fine-scale miniature art movement that blossomed in the 1970s. There were predecessors, however, and the museum had the opportunity to acquire this work from the 1930s in 2002. This is one of about 100 miniature rooms designed and created by Narcissa Niblack Thorne, who was also supported by the contributions of several craftsmen. Thorne had always been fascinated with small things and began collecting miniatures as a child. During multiple European trips with her husband in the 1920s, Thorne was inspired by Queen Mary's Doll's House and other notable miniature projects and decided to create miniature European rooms for an American audience. She proceeded to purchase hundreds of miniatures during a trip in 1930, which, in addition to her existing collection, she used to furnish 12 miniature rooms. After another collecting trip to Europe in 1933, Thorne began working on 14 more rooms, which she completed in May 1934, 4 days before all 26 rooms, including the museum's English Cotswold Cottage that you see here, were exhibited at the Century of Progress exposition in Chicago. Throughout the 1930s, she continued creating miniature rooms, resulting in an additional 31 European and 37 American rooms. The Thorne rooms were displayed at many of the most important gatherings of the 1930s and 1940s. In 1939, the 31 European rooms were shown at the Golden Gate International Exposition in San Francisco, after which they traveled to New York for the 1940 World's Fair. That same year, in 1940, the first set of rooms plus 3 new Asian rooms were exhibited in the Golden Gate Exposition. And you can see here, this is the catalog from the 1940 Golden Gate International Exposition showing our English Cotswold Cottage. Thorne donated all 3 sets and fund to support their care to the Art Institute of Chicago in 1941. The following year, the Art Institute sold the first set of rooms to International Business Systems, which was amassing a significant art collection at the time. IBM toured the rooms throughout the United States for several years, and I'm showing a catalog from an IBM exhibition in 1946. In 1960, or around there, IBM returned their rooms to Thorne for restoration, which she did with the help of Eugene Kupchak, who had begun working with Thorne in the late 1930s, so he'd been very involved in sets 2 and 3, not in set 1, which is what this one is a part of. After the restoration, Thorne's son, Niblack, donated 16 rooms to the Phoenix Art Museum in memory of his late wife. IBM donated 9 rooms to Dueling Gallery of Art in Tennessee, which is now the Knoxville Museum of Art. The location of the English Cotswold Cottage remained a mystery. In 2019, after more than half a century out of the public eye, the English Cotswold Cottage became available for purchase. However, the room didn't look exactly the same. Museum staff observed that Thorne and Kupchak made some changes to furnishings during the restoration, which is not uncommon for artists to modify their work and try different things later. The museum's co-founder, Barbara Marshall, was the daughter of J.C. Hall, the founder of Hallmark. Like Narcissa Thorne, Marshall spoke about always liking small things. When her father would return from a business trip, she would always want the smallest present that he brought back for the children. In the 1950s, Marshall discovered the shop of Eric Pearson during a visit to New York City. She saw a shop window, which was a former coal chute in his subterranean shop. And it took her some time to find her way into the shop, but when she did, she was really enthralled. The first piece that Marshall purchased from Eric Pearson was a Windsor rocker, like the one shown on the right. We have 333 works by Pearson in our collection, and one, this high chair, on long-term loan from a family member. The story is that Marshall saw this in Pearson's shop window and wanted to purchase it. He said he wasn't able to sell it because he didn't own the peg doll. An older woman had asked him to put the peg doll in the high chair, and she had visited the doll every day for the rest of her life. After her death, Pearson sold Marshall the high chair and doll. Twin Manors was the product of William R. Robertson, who is a major miniature artist in this movement. He actually started right around the time the movement started to blossom in the 1970s as a very young man, and he continues to work in fine scale miniatures today. He named this house Twin Manors because he made two of them, and one of them is still in private hands. Unlike some other miniatures that copy a single inspiration piece, this piece does not copy one piece, but is actually an homage to 18th century Georgian architecture, incorporating elements from historic homes from Maine to Virginia. Twin Manors, both of them, took 9 years to research and build, completing in 1991. Robertson started the project by building a 1/87 scale model. Throughout his career, Robertson has constructed his own tools and machinery when the one he needed didn't exist. He used a miniature shaper, table saw, and cutters to create over 130 different types of hardwood moldings for this house. The front, back, and sides are framed with Corinthian pilasters. The back and sides contain approximately 500 linear feet of beaded siding. The roof is constructed of approximately 12,000 hand-cut shingles made of walnut veneer. And there is a tiny deed to the house hidden in the newel post of the central stair. The rooms I'm showing on the right are the gentleman's study and the morning room, both located on the other side of the house, the one we're not seeing in the overall photograph. The drawing room on the first floor combines elements from two historic homes in Pennsylvania, Graham Park in Horsham and Woodford and Fairmount Park in Philadelphia. The carved overmantel with its broken pediment is made of approximately 100 pieces. Robertson commissioned 2 paintings, one for each house, from fine-scale miniature artist Marjorie Adams. They are based on Asher B. Duran's painting Lake Placid, New York. Robertson worked with Barbara Marshall to install the Twin Manors that's in the museum. So some of the pieces that are furnished, that the house is furnished with, were already in the collection when Twin Manors was finished. The kitchen takes some inspiration from the Jeremiah Lee Mansion built around 1768 in Marblehead, Massachusetts. In order to be as authentic as possible, Robertson painted the brickwork with ground-up 18th century bricks in the paint. The wood used to create the floors is cherry from trees that were over 200 years old from Cherry Grove, Maryland, and had been cut down in the 1940s. The ceiling is hand-carved walnut to appear like hand-hewn beams, including knotholes. The curved staircase that you see at the back left shows the post and beam construction, lath and plaster, and rough brickwork with mortar. And you can actually view these details from a window on the side of the house. You'll notice on the bottom right, there is the rocker by Pearson that we looked at in a previous slide. The Boston Beacon Hill House, commissioned by Claire Bagley Hammonds and built by Frank Matter between 1954 and 1957, is also inspired by multiple historic homes in New England, including the Harrison Gray Otis House in Boston and Captain Nathaniel West's house built by Samuel McIntyre in Peabody, Massachusetts. This is the only work in my presentation that deviates from the 1/12 scale. It is 1/48 scale, so 1 inch equals 4 feet. Hammonds wanted this smaller size so she could travel and share it with others. It measures 13 inches high by 12 inches wide by 9 inches deep, the entire house. The exterior walls are simulated brick, and the roof is made of tiny hand-split cedar shingles. The tall case clock, modeled after a clock by Eli Terry, is 1 5/8 inches tall. It's powered by the smallest watch movement made at the time, which had been removed from a diamond bracelet watch by LeCoultre. The lower hall and staircase are based on the John Pierce House in Portsmouth, New Hampshire. Ethel Forbes created most of the needlepoint rugs in the house, some of which were modeled after rugs in Hammond's home. The portraits in the house are after full-size portraits of Hammond's ancestors and include a portrait of Claire Bagley Hammonds by Frank Matter, the artist of the house. Anker Jensen created the Paul Revere tea set. The fluted teapot that you see here is smaller than a pencil eraser. The accompanied sugar and creamer are about the size of a grain of rice. The Studiolo Gubbio is a 15th century private study made of perspective intarsia, an inlaid wooden mosaic that shows armor, insignia, books, and scientific instruments on shelves behind partially open faux lattice doors. The inlaid images reflect the interests of its owner. The original Studiolo was in Federico de Montefeltro's Duke of Urbino's palace in Gubbio, Italy. The Studiolo walls and floor have been preserved and reconstructed in the Metropolitan Museum of Art. Barbara Marshall commissioned the miniature for the opening of a new wing of the museum in 2004, and at the time, the agreement to commission the work was actually signed in the Studiolo that's installed at the Metropolitan Museum of Art. English artist Barry Hipwell created the intarsia walls, and French artist Nick Stowe made the stamped tile floor. The coffered polychrome ceiling was made by Dutch artist Ursula Derby Skofstad. The paintings of the original Studiolo were removed in 1763. Two of the paintings representing music and rhetoric are in the collection of the National Gallery of London. Paintings representing dialectic and astronomy were known to be in the Kaiser Friedrich Museum in Berlin, which was destroyed during World War II. Dutch artist Johannes Landman did extensive research to create the miniature paintings, including a fifth one representing grammar. Barbara Marshall had a truly special way of collecting. She encouraged artists to create their dream project for the museum, and she would wait until they had it done. She waited as long as 14 years for a miniature to be complete. American artist Terry Smith chose Louis XV's study at the Palace of Versailles. Smith logged a staggering 6,000 hours over 4 years to create the room setting that is 15 3/4 inches high. The sconces, candelabras, 30-arm chandelier, and working clock are all made of 23-karat gold. The simulated candlelight in the room flickers at random. In August of 1988, Smith wrote to Marshall from his studio in Maine with an update stating, "The summer has gone by too quickly. It has been hot and humid, not good for gold leafing." 3,000 different gilded carvings grace the walls. The artist did not do multiple castings of any of them. There are 2,200 pieces of wood in the floor, all cut from the same piece of wood and laid in different directions to create the parquet. A hand-painted backdrop of the famous gardens overlooking the Orangerie, Lagoon, and hills outside Paris are visible through the working glass doors on the left side of the room. The Bureau du Roi, or desk of the king, is located in the center of the room. The desk is a functioning roll top and is made of over 36 species of wood to create the inlays that depict shells, ribbons, globes, cannons, banners, helmets, telescopes, shields, musical instruments, books, quill pens, protractor, and compass. These inlays are grouped to represent the fields of astronomy, geometry, poetry, and the French Army and Navy. Carved gilded figures of Apollo and Calliope hold candles on either end of the desk. The end of the desk, you'll see a plaque smaller than a dime depicting the three graces. This plaque actually replaced the royal monogram after the French Revolution, and there's actually one on either end of the desk. The original full-size desk took 9 years and 2 artisans to complete. Jean-Francois Aubin designed it, but after his death in 1763, his student Jean-Henri Resiner did the carving, veneering, marquetry, and ormolu to create the final masterpiece. In 1987, so about 5 years after the museum opened, Barbara Marshall commissioned 2 rooms from Jim Eisen and Therese Ball, 2 rooms that are attached, while attending the International Guild of Miniature Artisans Guild Show, the annual show. American artist Jim Eisen made the furniture based on the parlor and hall from the Ezra Carroll House in Springfield, New York, circa 1830. The largest surviving part of the house is the stair hall, which is installed at the Winterthur Museum in Delaware. And fragments of the other rooms in the Carroll House are installed at the Farmers Museum in Cooperstown, New York. So the artists had to do some conjecture based on these elements and the data of the house to create these miniature rooms. American artist Therese Ball did the wall mural and painted the furniture. The wall murals in the original house were done by itinerant painter William Price in the tradition of Rufus Porter. Most artists represented in the collection do not live in Kansas City. Marshall was discovering miniature work from the many annual shows she attended, including, among others, the Tom Bishop Show in Chicago, Philadelphia Miniaturia, and the International Guild of Miniature Artisans annual show. But Tom Warner and his wife Gloria were an exception. In all, Barbara Marshall purchased over 100 works, including 3 period rooms by Tom Warner, a Belter parlor, a Tudor bedroom, and this colonial dining room. Barbara Marshall commissioned this room to be designed after a room in her childhood house, then outfitted it with furniture by Eric Pearson. This is the Belter parlor, and Warner became known for his exquisite Belter-style furniture. This is a 19th century hall and parlor. All the furniture is made of rosewood, and the piano is based on one in another museum here in Kansas City, the John Warnell House. Gloria Warner was an integral part of her husband's business as a miniature artist. For this room, she made the red velvet drapes, the gilded overmantel mirror, and the 6-branch gilded Victorian chandelier, as well as upholstered all the furniture. William R. Robertson worked closely with Marshall on the installation of the room's miniature galleries. During this time, he joked that most of the miniature rooms depicted living rooms, dining rooms, and bedrooms. We didn't have anything in institutional green. So Marshall challenged him to create something. Robertson had been considering creating a miniature of a full-size antique drafting table with a wrought iron base. He was also fascinated with the idea of creating multiple copies of one piece of furniture. Thus, an architect's classroom from about 1900 was conceived. The room is 24 inches high by 23 inches wide by 19 inches deep. It took about 2,000 hours to complete. For the sake of authenticity, Robertson consulted catalogs from the period. So at the top of the room, you can see a sprinkler system based on the 1892 Grinnell patent for sprinkler heads. The image on the chalkboard on the left is a Corinthian capital based on Asher Benjamin's American Builder's Companion. The room contains a plaster model of a capital. Architectural drawings are copied from Bannister Fletcher's A History of Architecture. Some of the framed architectural prints that you see around the room are hand-colored steel lithographs from the 1850s. Others are reduced photographic reproductions, all of these matted and framed by the artist. Near the large window sits a blueprint developer with an automatic washing box and drying rack based on one shown in Oscar Perigo's 1906 publication, Modern Machine Shop Construction, Equipment, and Management. The device uses photosensitive paper mounted in a glass frame. The pulley system is designed to roll the frame out the window to develop the prints. The tables and stools are based on Koeffel and Esser Company catalogs. Robertson cast the bronze bases and initialed and dated all of them. The tables and stools raise, lower, and roll on steel casters. The tilt of the tables can be adjusted. Tools in the room include T-squares, triangles, protractors, compasses, dividers, trammels, ruling pens, watercolor paints, blotters, erasers, crayons, pens, pencils, brushes, a thumbtack lifter, and pencil sharpeners. The room contains 3 waste baskets, like you see on the bottom right. Each basket is 1 7/16 inches high and includes 1,020 solder joints. Allison Ashby and Steve Jedd moved from other careers, Ashby as a scenic artist and Jedd as a carpenter, to undertake their 3rd miniature collaboration. The full-size breakfast room is located in the William E. Martin House, designed by architect Frank Lloyd Wright. In the spring of 1998, Jedd was doing some carpentry work in the full-size William E. Martin House. He and Ashby had been looking for inspiration, and upon entering the breakfast room, Jedd knew he had found their project. Luckily, the owners of the home allowed the pair to spend time measuring, photographing, and drawing the room in December of 1998, so that they could begin constructing the 17 3/8 inch high by 10 1/4 inch wide by 22 3/4 inch deep room in January of 1999. The room took 800 hours and was completed by April of that same year. The duo took the room to exhibit at the 1999 Tom Bishop Miniature Show in Chicago, where museum co-founder Barbara Marshall arranged to buy it. The walls are made of Baltic birch plywood. The floor is individual planks of basswood, wood-grained by Ashby. The remaining trim is cherry, all fabricated by Jedd. The walls are muslin covered with a faux finish created with layers of transparent acrylic glazes. Jedd made the leaded windows by gluing strips of styrene to 1/8 inch glass. Ashby then coated them with acrylic paint, bronzing powders, and gel medium to replicate the texture and patina of leading. The furniture is made of cherry and mother-of-pearl inlay. It replicates the furniture in the room in 1998. Unlike many of Wright's customers, the Martins did not commission Wright to design all their furniture. The design of the chairs is based on a Wright design. The dining table was found in another room in the home and is believed to have been designed by Wright. The rug was made by Judith Adams specifically for this project. The glassware in the china cabinets is by various notable miniature artists who worked in that medium. When Marshall approached English artists Kevin Mulvaney and Susie Rogers about a possible commission, she asked her usual question of the artists: what had they always wanted to make? They turned the question around on Marshall and asked what she had always wanted to have, and she chose a jewelry store. Mulvaney and Rogers designed the room to fit a specific space inside the museum's miniature maze. Their creation is a semicircular 2-story jewelry store based on 3 architectural masterpieces: Neiman Marcus Department Store in Chicago, the Netherland Plaza Hotel in Cincinnati, and the SS Normandy. English artist Robert Ward used 15,800 tiny white iridescent beads to create this stunning 4-tiered chandelier. Maria Jose Santos of Spain created 3 figures to populate the store: a store clerk and 2 customers. All details in the room are carefully designed to accurately depict the theme. The gentleman holds a copy of the New York Times with the headline that begins, "Lindbergh does it." When Santos found out that Mulvaney and Rogers specified the room would be set at twilight, she added a 5 o'clock shadow to the men's cheeks. Excuse me. Of course, you can't have a jewelry store without jewelry. Mulvaney and Rogers chose Canadian artist Lori-Ann Potts to make the jewelry. Chris Toledo is one of the younger fine-scale miniature artists working today, but he, like his counterparts, talks of loving miniatures from a very young age, in this case 9 years old. Toledo looks to the architecture of his home state of California for inspiration. He says, having lived in Los Angeles my entire life, I always loved the heavy revival-influenced architecture. Toledo has developed a library of books on design and building techniques of the early 20th century. Bathrooms are a favorite for Toledo, who takes every opportunity to see period bathrooms, sometimes before they are gone forever. But they live on in Toledo's work. When photographing his work, Toledo enjoys using appropriate full-size pieces to show scale, like the razor and shaving brush in this photo. The size of this Art Deco bathroom is 12 1/2 inches high by 12 1/4 inches wide by 9 1/2 inches deep. The details in the bathroom indicate it would have been from an affluent home. This is an especially luxurious bathroom with a separate tub and shower. Green, often paired with black, was a popular bathroom color during the Art Deco era, and bathroom floors were often, almost always, made of ceramic tile. I see connections between the tile work and the central light fixture in the bathroom and the Chrysler Building in New York City, an iconic Art Deco-inspired building. Toledo laser cuts plexiglass to create his tile, then hand paints them to achieve the look he wants. The stylized mirror on the left reflects Art Deco design in its mimicry of architectural form and lack of a frame. The windows are leaded glass that would provide privacy without window coverings. The fixture on the right side is a foot bath. This room was purchased in the 2022 Tom Bishop Show in Chicago. We wanted to make sure to meet Toledo because he had been recommended to create the museum's newest miniature installation. In 2022, Toledo started working with the museum to create a new installation, a miniature art museum. We were looking for a better way to exhibit our miniature paintings and sculpture so that visitors could see these works installed as they would be in a full-size museum. We asked that the galleries be primarily white boxes to display the art, but gave the artist free rein to create the atrium. What Toledo created is a true masterpiece. The Miniature Art Museum has a central atrium and 5 galleries. Each gallery has its own theme. These will change over time as different fine-scale miniature paintings and sculpture are installed. The current themes are images of children, domestic life, Dutch Golden Age still life, landscapes, and modern portraits of women. The atrium does not depict a single existing room. It takes elements from many museums combined by Toledo into a classical atrium space. Toledo commissioned 2 other artists to create elements in the room. Barbara Sabia made the stained glass window above the outside entrance, and William R. Robertson made the drinking fountains and the lighting sconces. Other miniature artists greatly admire Toledo's technique of painting marble, which is shown in the fountain, columns, and floor. The gallery walls are magnetic, so hanging these miniature masterpieces is a breeze after small magnets have been placed on the back of the paintings. The top image of the Dutch Golden Age Still Life Gallery features paintings by Dutch artist Johannes Landman and sculpture by American Frank Balistieri. The image on the right shows our collections manager installing the work by Josephine Meyer after Duran, flanked by 2 different interpretations of Klimt works. Ellie Yitma of the Netherlands did the painting on the left of Frida Riedler, and Spanish artist Fatima Dona created the portrait of Adele Bloch-Bauer, better known as the Woman in Gold. Now that we've taken a look at several of the architectural masterpieces in the museum's collection, I'd like to open it up to any questions that you have.
Thank you, Amy. I wanted to remind people that we like to use the Q&A box for questions, so please do type your questions into the Q&A box, and I will kick us off with a question of my own, which has been interesting to say the least. But I wanted to talk about the Beacon Hill house, which you featured early in your presentation, and how that was a smaller scale. Does that present difficulties for artists? I imagine you have to almost have the hands of a surgeon to put some of these things together, but especially if it's that small of a scale.
It is more difficult to create the smaller pieces, although sometimes in the smaller works, there's not quite as much detail as there might be in the 112 work. Artists tend to have scales that they like to work in. We have one artist in the collection who virtually always works in 1/144. So, that's very difficult. But I would say the detail that artists put into 112 scale makes those difficult too. William R. Robertson actually conserved that room when it arrived in the museum. It had Claire Bagley Hammonds had traveled with it, and so it had experienced some changes from that, but also it had been in another collection before it was acquired for the museum. So he did that conservation, and he actually was the one that kind of located that teapot and the creamer and sugar, and was just pretty amazed at the size of it.
Incredible. It looks like we have a question from somebody in the audience who's raising their hand. So what I'm going to do here is see if I could allow. It's Dr. Juliana Delgado. I enabled your ability to start your microphone if you'd like. So if you have a question, feel free to enable your microphone. Oh, she lowered her hand, so maybe she didn't have a question. Letha, did you have a question for Amy?
I did. I was wondering what percentage of the museum's collection is on display at any given point in time.
That's a great question. So the miniatures and toys are a little bit different in that regard. 48% of the miniature collection is on display. So almost half of the miniature collection. The toys vary depending on what our temporary exhibits are at the time, but they generally are between 10 and 20% of the collection is on display.
And is that based on what condition the pieces are in? Do you have themed exhibitions? How do you kind of decide what is or is not on display at any given point in time?
We do have themed exhibitions, and so we kind of straddle that line of preservation and access. So things are in the exhibitions if they fit the theme, but also we don't really like to exhibit things for so long that they start to show effects from light or dust. And so the rest of the collection is in storage and then available to be exhibited. And we make changes over time. For example, right now, our donor wall in our lobby, which normally has some just examples of miniatures, now has holiday themed miniatures in those 5 cases. So we bring those out right before Thanksgiving and take them away after Epiphany. And we also, in the toy gallery, the toy collection, we have a temporary exhibit that is called Mid-Century Magic, A Tale of Toys and Aluminum Christmas Trees. And we've borrowed 18 aluminum Christmas trees, which were popular from 1959 to 1965 and thought to have pretty much met their demise when the Charlie Brown Christmas special came on the air, because you might remember Charlie Brown was sent to pick an aluminum Christmas tree, maybe a pink one, and he ended up with a bedraggled live tree. But we then paired those 18 trees with mid-century toys. So the toys are from the late 1950s through the late 1960s. So a lot of things came out of the collection for that. That exhibit's only up through January 29th. And then those toys will go back in storage until the next time we're ready to exhibit them.
And if you do have a piece that needs a little bit of work done on it, if the original artist is no longer with us, how do you go about having that done? Do you have a team in-house that helps take care of that, or are there certain artists that you rely on?
That's another great question. So we are a staff of 13. We're really small, and we don't have a conservation department on staff. We are very lucky in that William R. Robertson many years ago decided to move to Kansas City. He was working very intensively with Barbara Marshall on the museum exhibits. And so often when we have a miniature that needs conservation, we turn to him. For example, right now he's working on a couple pieces by Paul Runyon that have some damage to the finish. And he actually did a workshop with Paul Runyon when he was still living. So he is one of the few people in the world that really understands the techniques that the artist used. Often we'll use trained conservators. So if something has textile, we'll use a textile artist to work on it. But it is a little bit different than a lot of museums that have full-size pieces, because there aren't conservators that have specialized in miniatures.
And you were mentioning earlier that those aluminum trees were on loan. Do you tend to either loan out a number of your pieces on a regular basis, or have supplement your collection with pieces from other locations. And someone did ask in the Q&A specifically if you've gotten any of your pieces from the Los Angeles Museum. I think that refers to someone was saying that there had previously been a miniature museum on Wilshire in Los Angeles a number of decades ago.
So none of the pieces in our collection are from that collection. I'm aware of that museum. It closed before I came to the National Museum of Toys and Miniatures. We do loans, both incoming and outgoing. Another temporary exhibit we have right now is in a new gallery, our East Gallery. It's called Transformations, New Perspectives on the Art of Miniatures. And in that case, we've borrowed all of the work from artists and from their galleries. And the focus of the exhibit is on how they use these artists use miniatures to create their full-size artworks. So Lori Nix and Kathleen Gerber do large format photography. Amy Bennett does painting, and Carol K. Raskapthong does makes houses, and then she does stop motion video from them. So that entire exhibit is a loan exhibit. We do loan out as well. We've loaned to the Smithsonian we have Teddy's Adventures in Africa, which is a show and hut play set, and we've loaned that out to the Smithsonian. The Nelson Atkins Museum of Art, which is an encyclopedic art museum, is 2 blocks from us, and they borrowed a Lionel train and a dollhouse from the Art Deco period in a recent Art Deco exhibit that they had that actually traveled to other museums as well.
Great. And then one final question that I had, changing gears a little bit. In one of the meetings we had before this presentation, and I really hope I'm remembering this right. I think it was Narcissa Thorne who you were saying that part of the reason that she started doing these miniatures was to be able to teach people about many of these locations who wouldn't otherwise be able to travel to them or see them. And if I am remembering that correctly, could you elaborate a little bit more on that?
You are remembering that correctly. She had looked at several other charitable projects, and she decided that she wanted to do this project that would really be educational in nature, that people could learn more about European and American architecture all in one place. So sets 2 and 3 are on display in the basement of the Art Institute of Chicago. And I feel she would have been incredibly happy. The last time I visited, a young child, about 7 years old, ran up to an older brother and said, "It's like traveling the world and never leaving this room." And that's exactly what Narcissa Thorne wanted to have happen.
That's a great great experience relation there. It's great to hear children enjoy these miniatures and learn from them. I actually have a question sort of following on that in relation to actual landmarks. This is a question from Randolph. Have recreations of significant lost architecture been commissioned or collected? Things like Pennsylvania buildings like Pennsylvania Station, Larkin Administration Building, or the Imperial Hotel. The latter two are Frank Lloyd Wright's. I think the first one, I believe, is a McKim Mead and White, but could be wrong.
I think you're right. Yeah. We haven't specifically gone about doing that because Barbara Marshall really liked to ask the artist what she wanted to do for her commission, the commission pieces. She has gone with the artist choices. The Studiolo Gubbio, the one that is on display in the museum, is a fuller depiction of what you see at the Metropolitan, because the Metropolitan doesn't have the paintings since they were lost. They only have the walls, and I believe they have the floor. The Chris Toledo, as I mentioned, loves to do bathrooms, and he has given me several examples of bathrooms that he's seen, and then later whoever owned that house has renovated, getting rid of the Art Deco bathroom, so it only lives on in Chris's work. But we haven't, started that kind of process of, oh, let's recapture this lost architecture. It's a great idea.
And another question from somebody, or both a comment and a question, was in regards to the jewelry store with the elevator in the background. She was wondering if the elevator actually works. And maybe in relation to that question is, are there any miniatures that have moving? I know you sort of related the story of the clock with the miniature the small movement. Are there any other miniatures that you can tell us about that have actual moving parts or sort of working apparatus inside of them?
Sure. So as far as I know, the miniature elevator does not work, but there are other rooms that have working elements. I showed the pulley in the William R. Robertson architecture classroom. Actually, everything in that classroom works. The things can be moved around, and basically the tables can tilt, and it's like a real size architecture classroom of 1900. Although I will say I've shown it to architects who are working today, and it is very reminiscent of their own classrooms. It's a favorite piece of architects. In the Twin Manors, there are elements of the watch clock that is associated with the fireplace in the kitchen, and that does work. There are so many, and I'm drawing a blank on a lot of them. But it's very common for them to work. That roll top desk that I showed it can be opened. The lock actually works, and it can you can pull pieces out. We actually have a secretary that has hidden compartments throughout it, and you can open it up and pull out all the hidden compartments and find them.
That's great. Quite a bit of whimsy in these miniatures. I wanted to maybe thank you, first of all, Amy. This has been so enlightening. I don't know if Lisa had anything to add, but this has been wonderful, and what a great way to close our series of programs this year. And I wanted to remind people that if you want to learn more about the museum, you could visit the Toy and Miniature Museum at toyandminiaturemuseum.org. I hope I got that right, Amy. And I'm sure they would appreciate your visit or support. And, we do have some pop quiz questions, right, Lisa? And the first prize, which I don't know if you can, Preserving Los Angeles, which is a book done by members of ours, Ken Bernstein and Stephen Schaefer. We have a copy here for the correct answer for our first question, which I will ask here. So for those of you who would like to answer, to be a part of this pop quiz here and win a copy of the book, the first person to respond the correct answer will win the book, and you can do that through the chat box. Lisa, do you want to go with the first question?
Sure. All right. Question number one. This is a CPF related question. In what city is CPF's 2024 conference being held? Jay Bacon, right out of the gate. Dang, he was ready for that one.
Okay. So I guess I'll take the second question. We have some other prizes to give away. The second prize will be a $5 Starbucks gift card, courtesy of Lisa Versace. So for the correct answer to this one, we're asking you the question. Please respond in the chat box. First person to answer correctly wins the card. Which decade did the fine scale miniature movement blossom? This is something I believe Amy said during a presentation. Let's see who gets it right. It looks like Randolph got it correct. Thank you, Randolph. So we're taking down names here. We'll be sure to reach out to you by email afterwards. We have more, right, Lisa?
Oh yeah. Additional question also for a $5 Starbucks card. What is CPF's September statewide program called? Will be going into its third year. So close, Pat. I think we'll give it to Patricia. It's very close. Doors open. But yes, open doors, very, very close. Thank you.
Okay, so I think we're done with the pop quiz, but we also wanted to, we have a few minutes here. Feel free to ask any final questions of Amy if you'd like, but as we're doing this, I'm going to have Lisa share our auction items, and I wanted to sort of take the remainder of the time to highlight some of our favorite auction items here. And you can visit the website at californiapreservation.org/bid, and the winning bidders can feel good about the fact that their money goes to support our ongoing education programs and activities, including programs like today's free program. So if you'd like, I think I'll start with whatever you have in the first tab there, the gift certificate to Liz's Antique Hardware. Now, as many of you know, Liz Gordon is a donor to CPF, and she also donates to our annual scholarship program for students. We have about 150 student members here at CPF, and she has generously donated a $250 gift certificate to her hardware store. I think, Lisa, if you were to click on the images, we can probably blow them up. Even if you don't win the gift certificate, this is an incredible opportunity. We think everybody should see her shop because it's just filled with, I guess I would call it ephemera or little known hardware items. Some you probably saw in miniature version today. And maybe you could advance one more, Lisa. Okay. And that is Liz right there, and you'll see behind her there's a lot of door hardware behind her, and it's a wonderful place to it's almost like a museum in itself, just walking through her shop. And we'll probably have an opportunity during our annual conference this year to visit her shop. So we wanted to thank Liz and encourage you to bid on the gift certificate to her shop, which is currently, what is it at right now? $110 for a $250 gift certificate. It's quite a deal. So thank you, Liz. The next item is a favorite of mine. In fact, I bid on one, but we have multiple copies to give out, generously donated by the Lake Merritt Mid-Century Monster Fan Club. This is an amazing playground structure in Oakland that was recently restored and conserved, and it's still a great place for kids to play on the side of Lake Merritt in Oakland. So please bid on that. It's a lot of fun. We did a program last year on the Mid-Century Monster Fan Club. It was just a wonderful group of advocates who made sure that this whimsical structure continues to serve future generations. So that's a fun item. Maybe we'll highlight two more here. We like to highlight the efforts of other small organizations in the state, including the Los Angeles Conservancy, which actually isn't a small organization. They're the largest membership-based local preservation organization in the country, I think. But they have generously donated a membership to LA Conservancy, but also tickets to their last 4 tickets to their last remaining seats program for the 2024 season. And the great benefit of bidding on this item is that you can both attend the CPF conference, which would be from May 29th to June 1st. And then at the end on June 1st, I believe would be the first day of last remaining seats. So you can also attend last remaining seats in addition to the CPF conference. And then finally, I think there's a fourth one there. Okay, yeah. We also wanted to highlight this special opportunity, which is a tour and lunch for 6 of 4 Bay Area residences, private residences designed by Bernard Maybeck, Frank Lloyd Wright, and I believe, what was the fourth one? Or the third, one of the 3 is the Sanger House, the Maynard Bueller House, which is a Frank Lloyd Wright. And there's another, and the Guy Hyde Chick House, of course. So This is donated by Foster Goldstrom. As some of you may know, Foster maintains a fine collection of contemporary art, and he has it in his home, and it's his private home, but he also often shares some of the works in situ in his home, and they're right there in the galleries across the rooms in the home, which is also in Bernard Maybeck. This is a special opportunity to tour private homes in the East Bay, done by leading architects, and it's currently only one bid is on it, so we hope you'll bid on that. With that, I just wanted to thank everybody, especially Amy. Thank you for your time today, Amy. And we do have minutes here if you have any final questions. I don't see any other questions into the Q&A box, but we wish everybody a happy new year and happy holidays, and we will see you for our next program in January. So goodbye, everyone.
Thank you.